Well, hello and welcome to the most recent episode, the newest episode of the Sell More Printing webinar series. I'm Dave Halton, President of Marketing Ideas for Printers, and if you are a regular attender of this webinar series, you are most likely used to hearing the voice of our Marketing Director, Rachel Neese. Rachel is on an extended medical leave, and she's going to be back next time for the next episode of the Sell More Printing webinar series. But I'm going to hop in here and fill in for her today. And I'm going to do it with 3 simple slides, and we're going to talk about the 4 quadrants of selling printing. And this goes back for this presentation. It goes back to a time when I found myself basically test driving the website of a printer just like you. And as I was maneuvering around his website, I kept asking myself, if I was trying to buy printing from this printer, could I do it online on my own with no outside help? And I went as far as placing a fake order, and quite honestly, the experience wasn't that good. If I was a print buying customer trying to place a simple order online, I would have failed miserably, and quite honestly, I would have moved on to his competition. Not the experience that we wanted to, that printer would want to have. And I'll come back to that printer again towards the end of this presentation, but that experience eventually got me thinking about a time back to 1997 when Apple kind of reintroduced its product lineup. It was a time when, honestly, Apple was a mess, and it was the time when Steve Jobs returned to Apple. And when he looked at that product line when he returned, he found 15 different product platforms, and each one with many variants. Just a lot of different things floating around there, and none of them really was strong on its own. And so Steve's strategy was to simplify the product line by dividing it into categories, and those categories were consumer and pro models, and desktop and portables. And so if we fast forward from the time when he arrived in 1997 up until 2000, Apple had filled out their product matrix in these 4 quadrants. And if you can remember that time, it looked kind of like this. So we had the consumer desktop model. That was the original iMac. And then we had the Pro desktop model. That was the Power Mac. Next up was the consumer portable. That was the iBook. And then the PowerBook dropped into that Pro portable quadrant. And this worked. This really worked so well for Apple. This is the time, I consider it the turning point, when Apple really started to push forward, get their momentum, get their mojo going forward with lots of success. And they focused squarely on these 4 quadrants and the lineup in each quadrant. Now, as time went on and the success got really building and the momentum was building, they were able to expand the products offered in each quadrant and even invent new quadrants like the iPad and iPhone and Apple Watch. But that happened only after they had already achieved their goals in each of these original quadrants. So now I'd like to take this idea and transition it to you, to your world as a printer, and want to use this quadrant idea to bring into focus how print buyers order printing today. And if we take that same approach, we're going to get that same kind of clarity that helped Apple turn it around. And if we look at how print buyers are placing orders today, they're going to fall into 2 broad categories. There's going to be the simple orders, and that's an order which the print buyer can provide you with a production-ready file. And then a complex orders, which is going to require the involvement of your team to make something production ready. So that's the simple and the complex orders on the top of the matrix. And then we can also look at kind of, I guess we'd call them location categories, and that's on the side of the matrix. Your print buyers are either going to buy printing online, meaning on your website, or in person, and that's what the offline orders is. So when I'm saying in person, I'm using that definition to include orders that didn't start on your website. That could be orders started by phone calls and emails, and of course there's not as much in-person ordering happening these days, depending on your circumstances, and certainly with this crazy year of 2020, some of those rules just don't apply. So offline orders The in-person thing just isn't quite there like it used to be. We all know that. So that even brings even more importance to really focusing in on the quadrants where you're going to find success today. So let's take a look at the characteristics of each one of these quadrants. And if we take a look at simple online orders, these are the orders that just show up at your digital doorstep. They're ready for you to print. These are the orders that come from your customers behind their desks in their office, or with everyone working remote today, that might come from their home in their bunny slippers. And to have the success in this quadrant, they're going to use tools on your website to place an order with no assistance from you. And so success in this quadrant, it requires a web to print strategy, and it requires e-commerce tools to allow that to happen. So what is web to print? I think we're all familiar with at least the big picture definition of what that is, but it can be things like template libraries that allow customers to personalize documents or even build documents from scratch. Virtual printer drivers where your customers can create and print documents from any software on the computer. That's what gets the production ready file going onto your website. And then of course e-commerce. You don't want customers hitting that roadblock at the end saying, oh great, I got this order ready to go and I'm ready to pay for it and make it happen and I can't pay for it. That's why you've got to have that e-commerce on there, because if you want to be participating in today's online economy, you got to do what everyone else is doing, and e-commerce is definitely part of that mix. So those are the characteristics of a simple online order. Now let's move on to a simple offline order and talk about what that looks like. When your customer sends an email with a production ready file attached, that's when they're placing a simple offline order. And or if you're in an area where people are still able to visit you in person, they might be bringing in a flash drive. And what's happening here is your customers in this quadrant, they're going to expect a human touch to make sure that their order goes through with no surprises. And so here's what we need to look at for orders coming in a simple offline order quadrant. Your customers are going to expect quick communication and efficient communication. They're expecting that human touch, that interaction. So quick and efficient communication. And those two things, they might sound very similar, but they are different. Because if you're providing quick communication, but it's the wrong information, that's not very efficient. So you have to be both quick and efficient. And so you want to promote your efficiency and, more importantly, the personal touch that your team can provide at all stages of the sales and production cycle. That's what helps you have success in the simple offline quadrant. All right, now let's move over to the other half of this quadrant and talk a little bit about complex online orders. And if your customer is in this quadrant, they may even think they're starting a simple order, but they might realize that their order is not as simple as they think. So if they're starting an order online, that's an order form, and order forms are great for standard printing products like an 8.5 by 11 inch flyer, for example. Maybe have a few variations in there, like maybe offer the option to half fold or tri-fold that flyer or brochure. But let's face it, there's really no order form that successfully captures all of the information that's needed for a truly customized or complex printing order. You just can't do that without intimidating the customer with all of that extra information. And so that's when an online order process needs to have a little extra human intervention from you and your team to make sure that your customers are able to have success for complex online orders. So, where does success come from for complex online orders? That might be what just showed up in this box here, that order form. That's the starting point. You need to have friendly, not intimidating, but friendly online order forms and streamlined online communication. If you can provide that online order form as the starting point for that online order, your customer knows that it's complex, so they're going to expect communication about that. You've got to have that streamlined online communication. And of course, and we're saying online in there, That communication can still be a phone call, but because that order started online, chances are your customers are expecting, or certainly would not be surprised, to continue that conversation online. So friendly online order forms and streamlined online communication, that's where you will see success for complex online orders. It's also helpful for you to be positioned as an expert. If they're coming to your website expecting to place an order online, that's where you can provide that expert assistance with things like an online library of tips and information on how to make printing happen on your website. Even if they know you're going to get involved, they still want to know how to place an order online. All right, let's take a look at that last quadrant now, which is the complex offline orders. And the complex offline orders, it's really similar to the complex online orders quadrant. They want and expect that human touch, but in this case, they're going to come directly to you, not going to your website. They're going to come directly to you to get that expert guidance from you and your team. Again, directly to you, that might mean face-to-face. If the situation allows, it might mean a phone call or an email, but they're skipping the website. They're going to you for your expertise that you've already shown them that you have. So the success in this quadrant is you need to have a robust print MIS to capture that information for that complex order, and you need to have production management systems, because this is a complex order, so different things are happening at different times with different people perhaps, and so your system needs to be able to capture all of those different moving parts. That's a whole different topic, and very big topic, of course, if we start talking about print MIS and production management. So we're just going to let that one kind of stand on its own. I think you all are familiar enough with the systems that are out there. So we're just going to let that one stand on its own, and so we can have a timely webinar here today. So let's go back to the beginning of the webinar, and that's when I was talking about the website that I used to test a fake order. And if you remember what I said at the very beginning, I did not have success. If I was playing the role of a print buyer, I came to this printer's website, and honestly, it was frustrating. And if I was a print buyer placing a real order instead of the fake order that I was doing, I would have been frustrated. I would have moved on. And that was a concern to me. So on behalf of that printer, I ended up giving him a call and just to have that conversation with him. And it was really a very pleasant conversation. This guy, he really wasn't different than any of you. The thing perhaps that was a little bit different is he's at a time where he's looking at retirement, and he knows times have changed at an internet speed. He knows he has to change to be relevant, but he has retirement looming on the edge, or around on the horizon there, so he just doesn't have as much motivation to make those important changes at this stage of his career. So that's where I want to come back to you. If you're in that same position, you can maybe even skip everything I said in this webinar. But if you are at a point where you're still looking out past that horizon, if that retirement age isn't dialed in for you quite yet, you might want to consider making some changes so that you're relevant in each one of those quadrants. And so what I would encourage you to do is do a little bit of homework. I'm going to blow these answers out of here, or the bullet points out of each quadrant here. And here's where I want to encourage you to just draw out this quadrant for yourself and use that blank space and just take a look and just set aside some quiet time and honestly answer the questions. Do you have a strategy to serve your prospects and customers in each quadrant? That's going to require some thoughtful thinking and some thoughtful time. And it's important because our world is different. It's never been more different, it seems like, than it is right now. And your buyers and prospects' expectations have changed. But the way you serve them doesn't have to change. It may be that they're drifting from more of an offline into an online quadrant, or wherever they're moving on there. In any case, this is a good time for you to take a look at this quadrant approach, and in just the same way that this quadrant really brought clarity and success for Apple way back in the late 90s, the early 2000s, you can take that same idea and apply it to what you're doing. So that's your homework. I would encourage you to jot down this quadrant, take a look, and just look at it for yourself. How are you achieving success with a simple online order, with a simple offline order, a complex online order, and a complex offline order? Do you have what it takes to have success in each one of those quadrants? This is a conversation I love to have, and so if this is interesting to you, if you'd like to continue that conversation uh, beyond this webinar, I almost said offline, which is a little confusing if I would say that in the context of what we're talking about, but if that's a conversation that you would like to continue, I'd invite you to get in touch with me, either by phone, 800-736-0688, or by email, and I'll give you the short version, which is DH, my initials, Dave Holton, DH@mi4p.com. So that's what I've got for you today, and I thank you for joining me for this edition of the Sell More Printing webinar, and we look forward to seeing you again next month. And next month we will again welcome back Rachel, our marketing director, Rachel Neese, and she will take you through the next episode of the Sell More Printing webinar series. Thanks again for attending today, and now get out there and sell more printing.